Hi everybody, welcome back. This is our second video homework that we are going to take part in, and we are going to do this one in class just like we did the one yesterday in class, except today it definitely is going to be a quicker presentation. Yesterday's ran about 15 minutes long, and then when you pause it and rewind it to take notes, it ends up taking more than 15 minutes. So this one will definitely be shorter, but we are going to make sure that we are taking our Cornell notes in such a way that it is going to benefit us. So we will review some items that have to do with that. Let's get started. Today's title is called The Age of Railroads. So on your Cornell notes, I should see somewhere, either near the top of your notes or at the top of the page, I should see this title, The Age of Railroads. I should also see the date on that page. And let's get started. The second page, second slide that you see, we said is always going to be the concept slide. And this slide is not to be rewritten on your Cornell notes. Okay? These are to be read by you when you watch the video. I will read them out loud, of course, and then you put them in the back of your mind and think about them as we work our way through the video. Right? But if you do forget them, that's where you go back online, watch the video, and you see the questions that we ask. Okay? Now, let's go ahead and read these. What impact did the railroad have on the United States? And secondly, how did the railroad industry and transcontinental railroads specifically benefit the nation? What people did it help and who did it hurt? Now, the next slide is the key vocabulary slide. And again, we should see this on just about every presentation that you are given. And today we have 4 key vocabulary words. I mentioned yesterday that all the vocabulary words listed you may not hear about in the presentation. But just because you don't hear them, it doesn't mean you aren't responsible for knowing them. They are either keywords or events that help your understanding of the topics that we are going through as we work our way to present day history. Okay? Today you will hear about all 4 of these. In fact, you've already, the Transcontinental Railroad has already been mentioned in our concepts page. So let's get started. The age of railroads. Railroads are going to really come about in the first half of the 1800s, but it's the second half of the 1800s where they really boom. And in the United States, this happens very much in the North before the South. The North, at the time of the Civil War, had already become much more industrialized than the South. And the South was still very rural. It had a lot of the farmland, it produced a lot of the agricultural goods, which in turn often were shipped to places like the North, okay, where the North had really capitalized on the advancements made in industry. Okay? And because of railroads came into existence because of industrialization, but because of the nature of trains and what they do, it is a big part of the transportation revolution. Okay? It's in 1869 that the first transcontinental railroad is going to be completed. And that transcontinental railroad, it simply means that the railroad is going to start on the east coast of the United States and make its way all the way to the west coast of the United States. Now there's a lot of undeveloped land yet in the United States, but it provides access to a lot of this land, which is really key for who goes where, and we'll get into some of that right now. There are 2 sides to railroads during this time in the second half of the 1800s, and there's a romantic side and there's a reality side. In a way, railroads are romanticized because of what they provide. They provide opportunity. Young men have a chance to travel and go out and seek an adventure. There's lots of land to the west, so they can go ahead and start lives elsewhere. Or criminals, if they were criminals in the east, they can escape and move west and try and start their lives over again. Furthermore, young families are encouraged by the government, which established the Homestead Act of 1862, which was giving away land basically. It encouraged them to go west, find land, and grow crops, start a family out there. Okay, so that's the romantic side to railroads, but the reality side is a harsh side to it. When everything is said and done, railroads were very dangerous. They were very susceptible to Native American attacks, specifically out west. They're very dangerous because of communication issues. It led to a lot of injuries, a lot of deaths early on in the age of railroads. And even the building of railroads was a very dangerous job. With time, though, there are going to be some improvements made for certain things like the accidents. The introduction of time zones is going to help out with communication, and that results in fewer accidents, meaning fewer deaths, fewer injuries. But industry is where so many more improvements are going to be found. Because railroads can get places that people get places quickly that people weren't able to get to before. We see the introduction of new towns, which means new markets, new trading opportunities, and this helps not only those areas but cities that are already established. They are able to they have these new markets, they branch out further to do business with more people, more places. Okay. The speed at which goods travel is going to increase as opposed to using steamboats and having to navigate rivers. Natural resources are going to be needed, so coal is going to be really big. We know that we talked yesterday about the Bessemer process, where iron, if you have iron, you take the carbon out of it and you end up with steel. Well, steel is going to be a booming business. If you think about the football team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, well, it's around this time that basically Pittsburgh gains that name. It's going to be a booming steel town, have a booming steel industry. In addition to that, industry just as a whole is going to continue to grow, and urbanization is going to happen more so. As far as the workers are concerned, life isn't going to improve all that much. Immigrants are the main labor source for railroads, and these immigrants work very dangerous jobs. TNT is needed to create railroads, and TNT is a very dangerous tool to use while trying to blow up whatever it is that needs to be blown up in order to get a railroad to go through a certain area. And in addition to that, they are being paid very, very low wages. However, the group that will be hurt most by the railroads are going to be farmers. Farmers have a big problem to deal with. Okay? They need the railroads for transportation. At the same time, railroads can charge really whatever prices they want, and we'll get into that more so in another presentation. But farmers have to pay for those transportation costs, and if those prices go up, then they need to sell more of their goods. Here's where the problem is in order to sell more of their goods, they need more land. So they take a mortgage out on their home, then they buy more land, so they grow more crops with the hope that they sell more of those crops. But the problem is, if there's more of these crops, but there's not more demand for these crops, then the prices of the crops actually fall. And again, the farmers are stuck with making less money. It is a big problem, and because of it, the farmers start to organize, and that is where we see the beginning of Grangers and the Granger movement, where they come together and they learn about railroads. They're taught how to organize, they're taught how to fight the railroad system, and that Granger movement turns into something bigger, and we get the Farmers Alliance and we get the Colored Farmers Alliance. And finally, all of this culminates on, or in addition with a lot of sympathizers of the farmers, we get something called the populist movement, which is the movement of the people. And it becomes powerful enough and it has a loud enough voice that it is going to eventually create the Populist Party. And they get William McKinley nominated for president. And he runs for president supporting the farmers and people that understand what the farmers are going through. But he fails to be elected, and right then and there is the finish of the populist movement. The main purpose of the populist movement in the end was they wanted to solve the economic problems that people were facing, especially the farmers. And in the end, they didn't really accomplish this, but they did leave a couple of legacies behind. And that is, number one, that farmers can come together and they can organize and have a political impact. We saw that with the nomination of McKinley and the creation of the Populist Party. And things like the federal government creating the Interstate Commerce Act, which created the ICC, or the Interstate Commerce Commission, that was an attempt to regulate the power of the railroads. Even though that failed, it's another example of how it really did begin this challenging. It took challenging the railroads to the federal level. And the second legacy is that farmers had an agenda for reforms and try and make their plight better. And we see their plight continue to get better once we move our way into the 20th century. That's it for today. We'll see you tomorrow.